everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on episode 15 of the case study of Vanitas. Technically episode 3 of season 2, core 2, and yeah, things have been crazy. Things have been a bit crazy. Last episode, Noe, our innocent sweet cinnamon bun, discovered that charlatan Nania is with Chloe, who's the girl that is maybe the beast, is connected to the beast. And then she has an assistant who is also with her. And he's jealous of Noe because he only wants her to drink his blood. Fun times. And then meanwhile, Vanitas and Jean have kind of teamed up and made like a temporary truce alliance, being like, we both want to find out about Chloe. We both want to confront her for 2 different reasons. Jean has been, given the task to kill Chloe, and Vanitas wants to save her from whatever is ailing her. And so they both have different goals, but they are taking this opportunity to work together. And there were sexy vampire times. Dante and Johan are in on this, but Vanitas isn't very trustworthy of them. It's crazy. And then Astolfo is off somewhere just being insane. So I did have a few comments for this particular episode that were given before we start it, so I might as well just touch base on those. But mainly, if I can find my paper on here, Woosh and Sweebian noted that Astolfo is actually voiced by Marase Ayumu, which I'm like, what? Like the voice of Hinata Shoyo. I'm like, are you joking? He was in Empire of Corpses. He's a really good voice actor, but like I'm used to him playing like really high-pitched voices. He's played female characters before. He plays high-pitched characters. So, and seeing him do like a character with a deeper voice, I didn't recognize him at all. And it's so funny because on the Discord, we were just doing like, we have a BL channel on there, and we shared, someone shared a video of different voice actors trying to recognize BL voice actors based on like moans, and it was like, it's very intimate, but there was one of Marase where he was like doing this very deep voice. I'm like, that doesn't sound like him at all. So guys got the range. I'm like, yes please, yes please. So I thought that was really cool to note. Gin points out that there is a translation error in one of the previous episodes where when Ruthvern is talking to Jean before she goes to wherever Chloe is, he says Eric and Louise, but there's a part left out of the Crunchyroll subtitles that I'm like, really? There's a part left out that says Eric and Louise, your parents. And I'm like, oh, so my theory crafting means nothing. So Eric and Louise are her parents. There's a lot of Lou's in this series. There's Louis, there's Louise, there's a Lou that Vanitas mentions with Jean last episode. So lots of Lou characters. Everything's all loosey-goosey apparently. But I'm glad, Geen, that you pointed that out because I would have gone by the wayside. And then Herbata Zimbarim notes that the Sun Tower mentioned in episode 11, way back in episode 11, was actually a real thing. It barely lost to the Eiffel Tower in terms of the design competition. And a lot of reasons they say that it was because it was going to be made of solid granite and be 50 meters tall, be a Colossus Titan, and would basically be incredibly expensive, incredibly hard to make, and the Eiffel Tower was just a lot more feasible. And that if we assume this is like a parallel universe, then this entire story in the present takes place around 1888. 8's my lucky number, so how about that? But I thought those were all really interesting comments, so thank you all so much for noting them. I'm really excited about this episode. It has been hard to hold back from watching ahead, I can tell you that much, because this series gives you so much to go off of, and it just gets crazier and crazier as we go. So I'm like, what are we gonna do? So yeah, but I'm excited, y'all. I can't wait. So we're not going to waste any more time today. We are going to start right in and see what this episode of Vanitas gives us. I'm always worried for Noe because he's a cinnamon bun. He's strong, but he's gullible and easy to manipulate. And we don't know if he's a curse bearer at this point because we don't know if Nania's got his name. I'm assuming not because you think they would show us that, but it may happen this episode. We don't know. So I'm like, but so much happens in each of these episodes, so I'm excited to see what goes down. So we are going to start episode 15 of the case study of Vanitas and just see what we get. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, one, and let's do this, y'all. Well, in true Vanitas fashion, we get a lot of exposition, a lot of different lore and things dropped in. Oh my gosh, so Chloe D'Apshare. What a backstory. Oh my gosh, I felt so sorry for her in this episode, and I was finding myself really conflicted. And what's fascinating is I found myself really conflicted about her character because she, obviously, I believe she's been manipulated by a charlatan, definitely. Even though she says it was her choice, I'm like, was it really? Or if somebody keeps pressing your buttons, do you eventually break down? We didn't really get the answer this episode to find out the exact moment she became the curse bearer. We didn't get the exact moment she gave up her name, but we know it's her. We know she's the beast. But there's stuff about her character that's so interesting. Ruthvern, August, the idea of him making a transition and him being like Noe and then transitioning is fascinating. And we don't really know what exactly caused that. I'm assuming we're going to find out. And then everything is leading to a head where she's activated this alteration engine for whatever that's going to lead to. Oh my God. But there was so much with this backstory that I feel like I was like, Whiteboard needs to come out. Because we need to talk about this, right? But the entire situation with Noe is that he's just like, Noe's beef is with Charlatan, right? So let's talk about Charlatan. Charlatan, the parade. I'm going to put parade in parentheses here. We know that Nania is just what they call it. Nania says it's what, quote unquote, they call me. And they've been around for quite some time. And what's interesting is they showed up originally with Ruthvern. When he came to use Chloe the third time. He shows up one time, then he shows up the second time with Jean, and the third time he shows up and everything's different is when he shows up, and it just so happens to show up at the exact same time as Charlatan. I'm just saying it seems like a big coincidence, right? So I don't know if Charlatan is tied to Ruthvern, if they know and are working together. It would seem like maybe that would be the case, but what can we do with that? What does that mean? I don't know. But it seems like it's an awful big coincidence that she shows up right at the same time Ruthvern does. Seems like a coincidence. And her shadows are kind of similar to the shadows that appear on your body when Ruthvern bites you. Seems like a coincidence, but we don't know. But it's so weird that Chloe's gone all this time without knowing that it's her name. And also the fact that it seems like it pesters and lingers with Chloe. Also, what's creepy is the fact that Nania, aka Charlatan, can go between multiple people at the same time, because this happened with Chloe a long time ago, and the stuff with Louis happened, after the fact. So it's been like bouncing around like a parasite to different people, which is creepy. But we need to put down, I guess we need to go in here and get 2 more markers out and talk about Noe, and talk about our sweet, the patron saint of cinnamon buns, Noe, that his beef is with Nania. And this is gonna be problematic, right? Because the whole time Chloe and them, he is treated very well, right? Despite he is treated well by Jean-Jacques and Chloe. And he admits, he's like, my enemy isn't you. He's like, I don't like the fact that you're the beast and you've killed people. That's not good. But like the Charlatan he's like, you wouldn't have become a beast if it wasn't for Charlatan. So my issues with Charlatan, because they've killed Louis, that's my friend. They've infected you. You've killed people because of it. Like, this is a problem, right? My fear is that because Noe has been treated so kindly by Jean-Jacques and by Chloe, that if something bad happens to them, then he's going to get mad at Vanitas. And Vanitas is like, I told you what my MO was. We had this established. Because then we have Vanitas over here, right? We have Vanitas and John over here, who are both like out to expose and stop, and I'm going to put stop in quotation marks, and stop Chloe. I mean, Vanitas' whole thing is that he's going to get rid of the curse, and Jean's whole thing is that she's going to kill Chloe. That's the thing, right? That's the whole deal with it all, which is, it gets so complicated. And my fear is that Noe, Jean-Jacques, they have the conversation, right? Where Jean-Jacques says, do we have a right to tell Chloe what to do? I mean, and in some regards, yeah, Chloe has lived her entire life kind of having her existence dictated to her by what's going to happen. Her dad was like, I'm going to make you a human again. The thing of it is, the sad part is that we'll talk about the whole thing with Babel and everything going up, but the dad didn't stop and say, did you want to be a vampire? Are you okay with being a vampire? He just said, oh, we'll turn you back into a human. Don't you worry. Gonna solve your problem. And it's one of those things where what if Chloe kind of wanted to be a vampire? What if that was explored, but it never was? It was always treated like an infection, like a disease, right? That what she is she just, and I don't know if it's like a veiled reference of her, you know, if it's like a veiled reference to like someone being, you know, of a different sexuality, that like she's like, I woke up one day and realized I was a vampire. And we have the whole thing of Babel, but it's kind of almost a metaphor for she woke up one day and realized her sexuality was different than others. She was different than others. And no one asked her if she was okay with it or if she liked it. They just said, oh, we'll fix you. We'll turn you back to normal. And didn't treat her like she was normal to begin with. And Jean-Jacques seems to be like the first person around her that's like, no, she wants to be this way. She's making choices and living her best life. So I'm going to support her. And if she wants to do this, then she wants to do this, right? And I love Jean-Jacques for that. The only thing that's slightly bad is that I don't feel like Chloe being a vampire is a bad thing, but I feel like Charlatan took advantage of her and like kept poking at her, being like, aren't you lonely? Aren't you lonely? And like deceived her with the whole stuff with Jean and saying that Jean was dead when we know she obviously wasn't. And I feel like Charlatan deceived her and manipulated her to become a curse bearer, and that's a problem. I don't feel like Chloe being a vampire is a problem, but her being manipulated by Charlatan is an issue. But if that's what Chloe says she wanted, then I kind of get Jean-Jacques' argument of being like, well, let's just let her do what she wants. The issue is if she uses this alteration engine to like hurt other people, then it's a problem. But my fear is that Noe is going to tell Vanitas and Jean being like, no, she wants to be a vampire. She wants this. She's okay with being a curse bearer. And then Vanitas is going to be like, I have an MO. We talked about this. I don't care what you think. I'm out to do what I'm going to do. And it's going to cause problems, especially because we find out that August Ruthvern, we find out that he was quite like Noe. He was like Noe in the past. He thought that both sides could be together. And at first, I was questioning whether he was being sincere because that's not the Ruthvern we know now. And I was like, is he being manipulated? But I don't think he was. I think that when he first met Chloe, he was of the mindset that there could be peace between the two of them. And then the second time he comes around with Jean, it still seems to be the case, right? He's fostering all of this. He's still being like this liaison between humans and vampires. The third time, I'll go down here. The third time that he visits, he clearly has had a bad experience. He comes in, it seems like he's fresh off of a wound. He's had his eye plucked away. We don't know the circumstance. I want to know the circumstance. Like, what made Ruthvern change? What made Ruthvern realize that he could not trust humanity? What was the deal? We don't know. And I feel like we're going to find out eventually, hopefully, but we don't know at this point why Ruthvern is acting the way that he is. What's his deal? What's influencing him? We don't know. So there's that, right? There is that. And so I'm so curious, but he's so much like Noe, and where he says he's on neither the vampire nor the human's side. He believes that both are worthy of existence, which is exactly what Noé tells him in the restaurant, and Ruthvern says you failed the test. So Ruthvern thinks he's a lost cause. He thinks that Noé is, you know, weak-minded, and maybe he finds some of Noé in himself, and he's like, oh, sweet summer child. It's like Sweeney Todd on the boat being like, you are young, you will learn. Like, no, he thinks that Noé is going to figure out later that what he figured out, whatever that is. I don't know. I feel like it's just, and the problem is that Noé has sworn an oath that he'll do whatever Ruthvern asks him to when the time comes. And if Noé feels betrayed by Vanitas, but he shouldn't because he knows how things are, it's just going to get complicated and mucky real quick. And I'm not a fan. So yeah, so there's all of this. I just find it interesting. I like the idea that the, well, we spell their name out, the Day Apshares. The Day Apshares. I love that they're tied to sound and music with their ability. I like the idea. It makes sense. They have all the automatons that have like musical instruments. That's kind of cool, which again ties to the parade. So what's the deal? Like, why is there the parade and all the music that came to find her? What is the deal with that? What's going on? And she says that I just simply, you know, I'm just friends with her. She's like, never mind, sit down. The food is here. And everything's all really fine. And Noé's like, why are we doing this? Like, how can you be so calm? And Jean-Jacques, the ultimate respect your decision person, is just sitting there. They're just sitting there praying over their food. And Noé's like, what is happening? And Noé is like, look, that thing, I lost my friend to that thing. And it's dangerous. You shouldn't be involved with it. And I do think there's some manipulation. I do think Charlatan manipulated Chloe into thinking that's what she wanted, because Chloe thought she was all alone. Chloe, what's so weird is that when she's the beast, she must not remember who she sees, because she's seen Jean, unless she didn't realize it was Jean. She thinks Jean is dead. So there is a chance that when she sees Jean again, in the next several episodes, whenever that happens, if that happens, she's going to realize that Charlatan lied to her. And maybe that will change things. I don't know. I thought for a hot second that Jean-Jacques could be the beast, but he's not. It's Chloe. And she just has Jean-Jacques around. Maybe the question is why, how did Jean-Jacques get there? He wasn't there in the past. He doesn't seem to be immortal or a vampire like her. So why is he there? How did she stumble upon him? What's going on? It is really sad though, because the automatrons and stuff there signify that she's been alone and she's sad. And she's like, this is what I wanted. It was the price for my wish. But we don't know what the wish is. And so Charlatan gives out the idea that she can't just take a name by force sometimes. If a vampire is strong enough, she grants them a wish instead. What's kind of weird is that when she's telling Noé all this, there's a shot in the explanation where the shadows kind of become roses. Again, obviously, Charlatan is tied somehow to the Blue Moon vampire. Somehow. Because we established way early on that the Book of Vanitas, it allows it curses vampires, but it also saves them, depending on who's using it. So all this is going to tie back up eventually at some point, right? But she says, would I grant you my wish? My fear is, I'm glad that she doesn't have Noé's name at the moment. She says, what wish is worth the price of giving me your true name? And Noé's like, did you say the same thing to Louis? And so Noé feels, you know, he feels horrible because he's like, I tried to reach out to Louis so many times and Louis seemed like something was wrong with him. He's like, did Louis turn to you because he couldn't talk to anybody? Did you wear Louis down? He turned to you and you cursed him. And why did you do that? Like, how could you? Like, I feel like Noé just gets super mad about it. But there's nothing he can do at this point because Chloe's stronger than him. So he's just kind of stuck there with them. And they're not being hostile towards him. So he just seems like he's waiting it out until Vanitas and them get there. And that's when him and Jean-Jacques have the conversation about should Chloe actually be saved or not, if it's her choice, etc., etc. My fear is that Noé is going to get to a point in this series where he feels like maybe he has to save Vanitas, and his wish is to save Vanitas, and he gives it up to do it. I don't want Noé to become a curse bearer, but I don't like the idea of it. I'm like, And I don't know, would Ruthvern use Noe to make that wish? I don't know. I don't know! So it's just like, it's so frustrating. I do love the idea that he steps on the tablecloth and it makes everything like splash about and get ruined. And she's like, I don't care for children who waste food. And that's when she like punishes him, right? And that's when he gets attacked by her. But she just roughs him up, and then he wakes up and Jean-Jacques like, he's like, here's your soup. Like, they're so cordial to him. They're like the nicest. Not since Yao from Modao Zushi has a bunch of kidnappers been ever so courteous to their hostage. And Noe is like the most sweet hostage ever. He's just like, well, thank you for the soup, sir. And I did love Jean-Jacques getting so like embarrassed and flustered. He's like, oh, I can sew and cook. I don't know, sir. I'm like, the bisexual vibes in this entire series are through the roof already, as if we needed any more. But here they are with Jean-Jacques. I'm like, I'm not shipping you, Jean-Jacques, with Noe because I'm already shipping Noe with Vanitas. I'm a multi-shipper, but I really like Jean-Jacques with Chloe. I really like shipping them together. I don't want anything bad to happen to Jean-Jacques, and I don't want anything bad to happen to Chloe now, too. I want her to get saved by Vanitas because I do think Charlatan manipulated her into choosing it to give her name to her. But I don't know what's going to happen with this alteration engine. I just don't know. It's good. It's so frustrating. And so we have the scene with them making the stuff, and Noe is, you know, the most beautiful soul, and him offering to shake, you know, Jean-Jacques' hand, and Jean-Jacques like, nobody's ever offered to shake my hand before. And then there we go. So, okay, we find out from Dante that the Dapshires were conducting research on the world formula. And we find out why in this episode, which I'm glad. So there's been research on the world formula. Okay. So we get that established. He's like, they were conducting research on the world formula, even though the church forbade it. Okay. The church said no. And the church was against the research. And we find out that because of this whole Babel incident, that they were doing the research to try to find a way to turn Chloe back into a human. And we're going to talk about that. But the church was against the research because they didn't want anybody messing with the world formula anymore. Like, you're tampering with the forces of God. Don't do it. And so they did it anyway. And so that explains a little bit of why their work produced the alteration engine, a device for altering the world formula. So we have this alteration engine. This alteration engine that is supposed to be able to alter the world formula. That seems really problematic. I don't like that. I'm like, is that going to make people into curse bearers? Is it going to turn people into vampires? Is it going to turn Chloe back into a human? I don't like it. I feel like they've been doing this research and it's not good. And you shouldn't tamper with stuff like this. That's what gave rise to the beasts of Gévaudan. Uh-huh. And then what should or can be done? Is that why both vampires and humans are interested in all this? Apparently, yeah, most likely. And he says, well, where did you hear all this from? And he says, he heard it. Whose orders are you acting under? And he says, well, I heard it from Sir Francis Varney. Francis Varney. So basically, we have Francis Varney. Has a very Moreau vibe to their design. And they are the clockwork fiend that is the Marquis Machina. Deus Ex Machina, right? So that's interesting for a number of reasons. One, because we'll see Machina's name again on the letter that sends to Chloe later on. And then two, because the whole clockwork vibe makes me think of the Shapeless One, because he has the clock on his lapel. So is there a connection there? What's the deal? We don't know. It seems like, I don't know. They seem like they're being pulled by someone else's strings. And Vanitas is like, I don't know who this is, but they were tasked with getting involved for this reason. Because he's like, you're a member of the Blue Moon Clan. So there's a tie there. And then he wants to know whether the alteration engine really exists. And if it does, bring it back to him. So my theory is that Ruthvern is working with Machina. I feel like Ruthvern is working, because Ruthvern goes to Chloe to try to get, he goes to Chloe to try to get her to give him, to like activate the alteration engine, And he wants to use the alteration engine to probably wipe out humanity, right? Because of whatever they did to him. I'm sure that there was a mob or something that attacked him, killed the people he was with, his students, and he couldn't reason with them, and that's altered Ruthvern's perspective, but we don't know that for sure. But I'm sure him and Machina are working together. They want to, on both fronts, get a hold of the alteration engine and wipe out humanity. That's my theory. That's my guess. And they've sent Dante to go get it, because then they're going to use Vanitas, because they think Vanitas is just going to be, they're basically trying to use Vanitas as a pawn, which I don't feel like Vanitas will, I feel like Vanitas will take that personally and not want to have that happen. So, but here's the thing. I'm wondering if Ruthvern's command may be for Noe to bring the alteration engine to him. If Vanitas stops Chloe and saves her from the curse bearing and stops Charlatan in this case, I'm wondering if Ruthvern is going to make Noe's command to bring the alteration engine to him. If that's what he's going to have him do. I don't know, but it seems like that could be. But then we go through the history of here. Long before the beast reared its head, Chloe was watching over each generation of the Diapshire family. Yet you seek to take that black shadow away from her. And Noe's like, yeah, because she needs her true name back. And so, And he's like, and so then Charlatan says, is it a good idea to leave Noe and Jean-Jacques together? And Chloe's like, well, yeah, Jean-Jacques deserves a friend. Which makes me wonder if she thinks that she's going to die in this arc, because she's leaving Jean-Jacques and Noe to be friends. Does she think she's not going to be there? Because she says she's actually a very jealous person. She's actually very jealous. I don't think she's worried about Jean-Jacques catching feels with Noe. I don't think that bothers her. But Chloe said it was her choice to have her name taken, which I debate. I'm going to call a little BS on that, because I think there's some manipulation. She had been crying every day until that shadow appeared. So that's interesting. I mean, I definitely understand that Chloe was sad because her family all died around her. That's horrific. And then what she thought was the original goal of turning her back into human so that she could die and be with her family ends up becoming those around her sort of take that goal and warp it, manipulate for their own agendas. And now it's to try and do other things for a world that she has no contact with. Because that's the one sad thing about all of this. You think that she's been imprisoned in this castle her entire existence. And the problem is she wants to go out and see the world, but then Charlatan, like, keeps her there, right? She doesn't go out and see the world, right? So I'm like, even though Chloe wished, I want to know what Chloe's wish was, because it makes it seem like the Charlatan makes it seem like her wish was to not be lonely anymore because she was all alone. She thought Jean was gone and everything. But yet, I'm like, did her granting the wish bring her to Jean-Jacques? We don't get an answer. We get it all led up to, and it's hinted at, and then the episode cuts out before we find an answer to the question, right? And so I'm like, my theory is that Jean-Jacques, like, showed up. There was nothing I could do. So that line makes it seem like Jean-Jacques was there before Charlatan got to her. But we never see him while the flashback is happening. So, I don't know. And then Chloe says, I can't stand when someone touches what's mine without asking. So I don't know what that means. And so if Chloe wants to keep her name, gone, he's like, I'm going to be with Chloe till the very end, even if it means we destroy each other. So yeah, I feel like Chloe's not too worried that Jean-Jacques is going to leave her. She knows that he's with her. It's just fascinating. And I love the idea that we have her, like, walking up the stairs and we see her with the candle and the shadow is, like, coming out of her head. Oh, it's creepy. It's very, very creepy, walking up to the alteration. And she says, the scars left by Babel finally began to fade. So, okay, the scars. I feel like there's a lot with that, because in the last episode, we just got the notion of Vanitas having scars, and Ruthvern probably has scars from losing his eye. So there's a connection of scars. There's a note about that. So scars from Babel. And Babel was the experiment Scars was the Babel was the experiment where the alteration, all of this first began, right? When vampires first appeared, right? In the latter half of the 16th century. So about 200 years ago. So she's about 200 years old. Okay? Or 300. Because if it's 16th century, it was the 1500s. If we're almost to the end of the 1800s, then she's about roughly 300 years old. Okay? And Ruthvern's probably about the same age, right? And so he's like, no one can know that you're a vampire. I awoke one day to find out that I was a vampire. Yeah, I believe once Babel rendered the world formula unstable. And we know, yeah, Babel, it rendered the world formula unstable. And that's where vampires appeared, right? So that's interesting to note. She says that from there, it began having an effect on this world too. So there are humans that became vampires. Okay, well, that's a whole thing, because I was curious. I wanted to know, like, I was thinking from the Babel thing that vampires sprung up from the Babel experiment. But apparently not only that, some humans were turned into vampires from it. It would just had this effect that like rippled across both worlds. So that's interesting. All right. So from the Babel thing, that's when the family decided to keep experimenting and try to create the alteration engine so that they could turn her back. Okay. And then I will make you human again. And then after I turned 11, my body stopped aging. And they told everyone that she had died so they wouldn't question it. And then she just kept hidden in the castles to protect her. Okay. All right. Go from there. And then that way the Dioptra's vampire was hidden away. And so he had all these alchemists study the world formula. And there's like blue liquid in the vials. And then he dies. And she's left without her family. Make Chloe Dioptra human again. My father's last wish gradually transformed with the passage of time. And there's this concept of wishes transforming and evolving and developing, because her father's wish was to make her human again, but that transforms. And so then we have the idea that the whatever wish she made for Charlatan, that maybe has transformed over time as well, because it's been apparently decades upon decades since she made that wish. So there's so much with this episode, right? There's so much, but I feel so bad for her. Like, she's like, the House of Dioptra's ardent wish, I became witness to it all. And she's like, I watched over them. And it kind of sucks, because she couldn't do anything. They probably wouldn't listen to her because she was a woman, and she couldn't do anything because she was a vampire. She's supposed to be hidden. So it sucks that she just kind of sat there and had to watch things change over time and didn't really have any agency or could do anything about it. And and then she befriends Ruthvern, who seems like this nice person and seems like a totally different person at the time. And he's so kinder. And she shows him a key element in researching the world formula is what to use as the medium for tampering with it. And so we chose sound as our medium. So she's like, we can tamper with the world formula using sound, which is where Charlatan comes from. So I'm curious, because Charlatan uses a lot of sound. So I'm curious how that goes. And I love the fact that she has this like very equal rapport with Ruthvern. They both seem like they're on the same page in terms of like their strength and their intellect. And Ruthvern says he's going to use the world formula to make the world a better place. And after watching this episode, I don't think he was lying when he first visited her. But then again, those wishes evolve and change. And that wish to save the world and save both humanity and the vampires evolved to, no, we need to destroy humanity now. They're a threat to us. And it changed over time, which is so fascinating. And then she's like, the world. I didn't even think about the world. And so then he talks about how in the eyes of the church, vampires are an abomination. He's like, I want to end the struggle between them at all costs, which is kind of like what Noe has been thinking. And I feel like meeting someone like Roland shows Noe that there are people in the church that can be open-minded and willing to help and change things. So it's so fascinating to see how similar Ruthvern and Noe are at this point. They're both very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And then he brings Jean back. And all the stuff with Jean was so cute. Like all the scenes with Jean where she's leading her through the forest. And it's the first time that Chloe, in like hundreds of years, like ventures outside the castle and gets to see the world outside, right? It's awesome. Now, we don't know, did Charlatan stumble upon her in the woods when Jean let her out? Or did she come when Ruthvern came back? We don't know. It doesn't exactly tell us. But I love the idea that Jean was getting Chloe to come outside, but in the same vein, it also led Chloe to make the decisions that she did. So it's like, it's this big domino effect, right? And then they fall into the batch of blue flowers. Now, is there a significance to that? Is there a significance to there being the blue flowers around there? Maybe that's where, maybe when they stumbled upon the blue flowers, is that where they first came into contact with Nania? Because it's tied to the Blue Moon Vampire, the curses are. So is that the first place they discovered her? Because when she goes back to the flowers, that's where Nania tries to get a hold of her again. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But Ruthvern seems so kind the first and second times he visits her. Like he has this like soft look because he knew Jean's parents, right? So my theory is that he knew Jean's parents, and then what ended up happening was Jean's parents ended up dying at the hands of humans, and then he makes Jean the brochure to go after the vampires, and then he slowly, I feel like and my dog is like, throw my toy, there we go. And I feel like with Ruthvern, he had all these students that he was close with, and then humanity wiped them out, and it completely altered his perception. And from there, he thought that humanity wasn't worth saving or working with because they killed the people he cared about. That's just my theory. I want to know more about Ruthvern after this episode because he seems like a totally different person. And she's like, I couldn't go see Jean because I couldn't abandon my family. And that's when Charlatan shows up and says, even though humanity may very well abandon you. Mm-hmm. So basically doing the idea that you can't abandon your family in the research, but they're leaving you behind because you're stuck there. And I don't think Chloe necessarily has an opinion about humanity. I think she just has an opinion about her own fate and why she's stuck there. But then Ruthvern shows back up and he has the bandages. He looks completely different. He acts completely different. Whatever has happened has changed his entire mindset. What's curious about this scene is two things. One, the curtains are drawn back, right? The curtains are drawn back and there's blue light behind him. The blue light like the Blue Moon Vampire, the blue light like with the curses. So is there a connection there? Did he run in with the Blue Moon Vampire? We don't know. There's that. And also there is the parallel, so I reach for this. There is the parallel of the Shapeless One finding Noe and Ruthvern coming back and seeing Chloe. When the Shapeless One found Noe, there was the circus tent and stuff pulled back, and it was a curtain pulled back, and he found him there. When Ruthvern finds Chloe, it's the same thing. So I feel like there's a connection there, but I'm not sure, right? But I feel like there's a connection there, but we don't get it. But he tries to get her. He says, is the alteration engine complete? And then he just looks he's like, I was wrong. I thought they could be reasoned with, but they cannot. I was wrong from the start. Now, we don't necessarily know if he's talking about humanity. He could be talking about the Blue Moon Vampires. He could be talking about vampires. We don't know. We just know that whatever he is referring to, he thought that they could be reasoned with and they could not. What's interesting is that there is the shadows around him. The shadows, the red eye that's kind of like the one that the Shapeless One had. There's the red eyes there too. And the idea that maybe Charlatan is connected with his powers. I don't know. It seems like there's some connection there, but did he get the powers to affect people's blood from before? is that did he make a deal with the curse bearer? Is he a curse bearing vampire? Did he make a deal with Charlatan to get his wish, and his wish allowed him to command people through biting them? We don't know. We don't know. What we do know is that she's like, you can't have it. And he tries to make her, he says, swear to me that you'll use your powers as I command. And she's like, F you. I'm so glad that Chloe was like, get out of here. Leave. You're not using my powers. I'm not swearing to you. And like his eye starts bleeding and he leaves. He says, Chloe, and then he leaves. Almost like he didn't want to do it. Almost like he didn't want to make her do it. There's a connection there. I'm so fascinated. And she's like, that's when I lost my very first friend forever. So her and Ruthvern are not on good terms now, clearly. And Ruthvern's like, well, if she's not going to give us the alteration engine, I'm going to send Jean to kill her and we'll take it back. So that's why I think him and Machina are working together. Both of them want the alteration engine. Machina is getting Vanitas to go get it, and Ruthvern is getting Jean to go get it. And in both situations, they're both going to benefit from taking it from Chloe. But it's so sad. And then again, Charlatan shows up with the parade and all the instruments. So what is the connection? What is the deal? Right? And that's when I learned the war between human and vampire kind was over. And Machina sent the letter, right? Saying that the architect of peace was August. He done all he could to ascend all the way to the Senate. So, interestingly enough, Ruthvern stops the war, does all this with peace, and makes it to the Senate and the upper government. So there's a lot with Ruthvern that we don't know that I'm very, very curious about. Like, how did he obviously wanted to like destroy one of the parties. Like he wanted to kill one of the parties with the alteration engine, and because he couldn't get it, suddenly he decided there had to be another strategy. So I want to know about Ruthvern, like what's his history, what's the timeline, why did he change his tune from the first 2 times he saw Chloe, why did he change his tune after he went to her and she wouldn't give him what he wanted, what is the deal? Him and Machina, I feel like, are working together. Maybe that's not the case, but I feel like it is. So what is the alteration engine going to do if it means by altering the world formula? What are we doing with it? But I like that we can also tell like a passage of time from the outfits that she's wearing. I really like her pink outfit with the beige and the green. I really like it. It looks like the pieces of paper that she's doing. She said, I continued my research alone, decade after decade. So yeah, she said I continued her research alone. So at that point, everyone around her was gone, but she still wanted to do what her family sought out to doing. So is she going to try to become human? Is she going to try to, what is she going to do now with the research she's been conducting? And then we see the idea that she's back in the field of flowers. Her outfit looks very similar to the one she's wearing now. And that's when Charlatan talks about her being lonely and surrounds her and says that she's locked up in a cage. But I'm like, but she wasn't technically locked up in a cage. I mean, she feels like she is because she wants to finish the research, but she's always been able to go. She just didn't want to because of obligation. But that's when I was like, I get that Charlatan is tapping into the fact that it's like you're lonely because you're stuck here because you believe you have to keep doing this research by yourself. That's true. And I could see where Chloe would relate to her because of that. And I thought the route it was going to go would be like, I'll be your friend. I'll stay with you if you let me in. I thought that's the direction we're going. But then she shows her killing Jean. And I'm like, that's a manipulation that did not need to happen, right? Like, she wasn't even thinking about that. And then she's like, why am I killing Jean? And then Nania just like laughs hysterically. And she's like, what's the deal? And they say a young maiden was killed. Her name was Jean. Her entrails had been devoured by a wolf or some other beast. But that seems like an odd coincidence, right? Like, I don't think that's true. And so she's like, it was just a nightmare, or was it? What is your wish? And at this point, she's like, well, did I kill her or not? But at this point, she hadn't because Nania didn't have her name yet. So she manipulated her, and we assume that that's when she gave her the name and destroyed the village or whatever, but we don't know for sure. So I'm waiting for next episode to come and give us answers. And she's like, now the time has come. My wish will finally be granted. So I'm assuming, is she going to make herself human? What is she going to do with all this? I do love the engine having the vines wrapped around it to show like the passage of time. The vines have gotten into the library and the research lab. I do love the aesthetic of it. But I'm so curious, like, what is she going to do? And they're like, what is that light? And Vanitas is like, now we gotcha. So, and we still don't know about Astolfo. He's running around somewhere. I'm sure he's seen this light too. So next episode, we have Astolfo somewhere. We have Jean thinking she needs to kill Chloe. Chloe doesn't know Jean still exists or that she's still alive. Vanitas thinks he has to save Chloe and give her name back. Jean-Jacques believes that she doesn't need to have her name back. She should be fine. Noé's caught up in the middle of this and probably will agree with Jean-Jacques, but also understands Vanitas. And what's he going to think of all this? What is Chloe's goal with the alteration engine? There's a lot. There's a lot going on. And I can't wait to find out exactly where it's headed. So, and we have all the stuff with Ruthvern that we still have lore for, but no explanations. So, fun times. But yeah, so I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I will be back very soon with more of the case study of Vanitas. Bye!